I want to be upfront about something before I get into this. I'm not the kind of person who scares easily. I'm not saying that to sound tough. I'm saying it because it matters for the story. Because when I tell you that by night 6, I was genuinely terrified, I need you to understand that that was not a normal state for me. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that in the summer of 2017, I was 26 years old, broke, and in between jobs. I just finished a contract warehouse position that dried up in May, and I was burning through savings faster than I expected. A buddy of mine, a guy named Troy, told me about a posting he'd seen on a local Facebook jobs group, private security, nights only, at a property called Harlow Lake Campground, about 40 minutes outside of Millhaven, which is a small town in upstate New York that most people have never heard of and wouldn't go out of their way to visit. The campground had been closed since 2014, some kind of permit dispute with the county. The owner, I never met him. Everything was handled through a property management company, wanted someone doing walkthroughs a few nights a week to deter vandals and make sure the structures weren't being broken into. It paid $22 an hour, cash, for 8-hour overnight shifts. For context, in 2017, in a rural area, for a guy with no security experience, that was genuinely good money. I took it. The property management woman I spoke to on the phone was named Karen. Very matter of fact. She emailed me a PDF with a map of the property, a code for the front gate padlock, an emergency contact number I was told to call only if there was actual structural damage or a genuine trespasser I couldn't handle alone. I asked her what couldn't handle alone meant. She said, if there's more than one of them. That was the extent of my training. The property itself was about 60 acres. It had a main gravel road that ran in a rough loop through the whole campground, with individual sites branching off on either side. Most of the sites were just cleared dirt patches with rusted fire rings and rotting wooden picnic tables. Some had small platform tent bases still standing. A few had permanent structures, 2 shower block buildings, a camp store, a small maintenance shed, and a caretaker's cabin at the far north end of the property that had been locked since I started. My security booth was the camp store. It had electricity, a space heater, a folding table and chair, and a window facing the main road. That was it. I was given a flashlight, a logbook, a 2-way radio that connected to exactly nobody, because the management company didn't have anyone monitoring the other end overnight, and a can of bear spray. I asked Karen about the bear spray. She said the property backed onto state forest and there had been some bear activity in previous years. I decided not to think too hard about that. My routine was simple. I'd arrive around 10 p.m., check the gate was locked, do a full walk of the main loop, which took about 25 minutes at a steady pace, log anything unusual, then settle into the booth. I'd do 2 more walkthroughs during the night, one around 2 a.m. and one around 5 a.m., then wait for sunrise and drive home. Nights 1 and 2 were completely uneventful. Night 3, I found a section of perimeter fence that had been cut. It was along the eastern edge of the property, maybe a third of the way down from the front gate. The fence ran along the tree line there. A basic chain link, maybe 5 feet high, meant more to mark the boundary than actually stop anyone. Someone had cut a section of it with wire cutters. Clean cuts on both sides, the flap bent outward toward the inside of the property, not out, meaning whoever made it had come in from the woods. I wrote it in the log, sent Karen a text with a photo. She replied the next morning saying she'd note it, and that it was likely kids from town who used the old campground to drink on weekends. That explanation made sense to me. I actually felt relieved. Night 4. I did my 2 a.m. walkthrough. Nothing unusual on the main loop. But when I got back to the booth, my logbook was open. I specifically remember closing it when I left. I was pretty particular about it because the pages had a habit of curling in the humidity, and I didn't want the ink smearing. It was open to the page where I'd logged the fence cut. I told myself I'd just forgotten, that I'd left it open in a hurry. I sat in the booth for a long time after that. The 2-way radio had been giving me intermittent static all week. Karen said the terrain made the signal unreliable. I'd gotten used to it. But that night it felt different. Less like interference and more like something pressing against a frequency. I'm aware how that sounds. I'm just telling you what it felt like. I did my 5 a.m. walkthrough and went home. I almost didn't come back for night 5. I did though. Night 5 started like the others. Gate locked. Walkthrough clean. Nothing on the main loop. It was around 1:30 in the morning when I noticed the light. The caretaker's cabin at the north end of the property, the one that had been locked since I started, had a window facing south toward the rest of the campground. I'd passed it on every walkthrough for 4 nights. The window was always dark. That night there was a faint orange glow inside it. I stopped walking. It could have been anything, a reflection, a phone screen, my own flashlight catching the glass at an angle. I turned my flashlight off. The glow was still there, dim, barely there, but steady. I did not go to the cabin. I want to be clear about that. I am not someone who walks toward the unexplained light in the locked building at 2 in the morning. I have seen enough movies to know how that goes. I walked back to the booth. Quickly, I called the emergency number Karen had given me. It rang 6 times and went to voicemail. I left a message describing what I'd seen. Calm, specific, professional. Then I sat in the booth with the space heater and the logbook and I waited. By 3 a.m. the glow was gone. I did not do my 5 a.m. walkthrough. I sat in the booth until sunrise and then I drove home. Karen called me back at 9 that morning. She said the cabin had an old emergency lamp installed by the previous caretaker that was solar charged and occasionally activated on its own. She said it was a known issue and she should have told me about it. She sounded completely unbothered and I almost believed her. Except, when I'd walked back from the cabin to the booth, I'd taken the main gravel road. The mud along the edge of the road, it had rained 2 days earlier and the ground was still soft in places, showed my footprints clearly. Heel to toe, heading south toward the booth, there were other footprints beside mine, heading the same direction. Whoever made them had been walking behind me. I sat in my truck in my driveway for about 20 minutes after I got home that morning. I thought about quitting. The money was the only thing that stopped me. I rationalized it. The footprints could have been older prints I hadn't noticed before. The rain had been patchy and maybe a dry section had preserved tracks from before I started. The logbook could have been something I'd done myself and forgotten. The fence cut was probably teenagers. These are the things I told myself. I also stopped telling myself Karen's explanations were complete. That night, night 5, is when I found the circle, the one I described at the beginning. Footprints looping all the way around the security booth, close enough to touch the wall. A complete deliberate circle in the mud. I stood outside the booth in the dark and I thought about what that meant. Not what could explain it. What it meant. It meant someone had stood outside every window of that building while I was inside it. It meant they had come close enough to hear the space heater running and they had walked away. Whatever they wanted, they hadn't done it yet. I changed my routine. Starting night 6, I randomized my walkthroughs. Different times, different routes. I stopped using the main road entirely and started cutting through the campsites instead, staying off the gravel so my footsteps were quieter. I also bought a cheap trail camera from a sporting goods store on the way to work and zip-tied it to a tree facing the booth. I felt slightly better having done something. Night 6, 2 a.m. walkthrough. I went north first this time, toward the caretaker's cabin. The window was dark. I checked the door, still padlocked. I circled the building carefully, staying low, flashlight off. Nothing. I worked my way back south through the campsites on the west side of the property. Old fire rings, rotting picnic tables, the shower block building. I checked the door, latched from outside as always. Then I got to campsite 14. Site 14 was one of the platform sites, a raised wooden deck that had held a large tent at some point. The platform was still solid, about 10 feet square. I'd passed it on every walkthrough. On the platform, laid out flat, was a sleeping bag, relatively new, dark green, neatly spread out as if someone had just gotten up from it. Still warm. Someone had been sleeping on that platform, on the property. Every night I was there. I understood then that the footprints weren't random. This person knew my schedule. They knew my routes. They'd been living 60 feet from the main road in one of the sites I passed every single night, and they had timed everything. The circle around the booth, the cabin window, everything. Around my movements. They weren't hiding from me. They were watching me. And they knew I'd eventually find the sleeping bag, because it was night 6. I only had 2 shifts left. I turned off my flashlight. I stood completely still next to the platform, and I listened. The forest makes a lot of sounds at night. Wind, animals, the trees settling. Over 5 nights, I'd gotten used to the specific texture of the quiet out there. This was different. There was a sound coming from the tree line east of Site 14. Not an animal. Deliberate, measured, like someone moving slowly and carefully through the undergrowth, trying not to make noise and almost succeeding. Getting closer. I ran. Not toward the booth, toward the front gate. I didn't think about the logbook or the trail camera or anything I'd left behind. I just ran down the main gravel road as fast as I could move in the dark, flashlight back on, not looking behind me. I hit the gate, fumbled the padlock code twice, got it on the 3rd try, shoved through and got to my truck. I locked the doors. I sat there with the engine running for 10 minutes before I drove away. I called the emergency number from the road, left another voicemail. This time I was not calm or professional. I said there was someone living on the property, that I'd found their camp, that I'd heard them in the woods, and that I was not going back. Karen called me back at 7 that morning. She thanked me for my service and said the contract was being terminated effective immediately. Not because of me, she said. The permit dispute had resolved. The property owner had decided to sell rather than reopen. My final payment would be mailed within 5 business days. I asked her about the person I'd found evidence of on the property. She said she'd pass along the information. I asked her if she was going to contact police. She said it wasn't her call to make. That was the last time I spoke to Karen. I went back the next afternoon, daylight. I drove to the gate, which was still padlocked. I could see the trail camera still zip-tied to the tree where I'd put it. I used my code, still worked, and walked to the camera. The SD card had been removed. The camera itself was fine. Just the card, gone. I walked to Site 14. The platform was empty. No sleeping bag, no trace of anything. I walked the perimeter. The cut in the fence on the east side had been partially repaired by Hyde. Not professionally, just the flap bent back into place, like someone didn't want it to be obviously open anymore. I drove home, and I didn't go back. I've thought about it a lot over the years. Who was out there? How long they'd actually been on that property before I started. Whether they'd been watching the campground for months, and I just happened to show up in the middle of whatever they were doing there. The sleeping bag being warm when I found it means they were close. The SD card being gone means they knew about the camera. The camera I only set up on night 6, which means they were watching me set it up, and they had roughly 18 hours between when I ran and when I came back in the daylight to clean up, take the card, and disappear. Whoever it was, they were organized, they were patient, and they had been watching me carefully from the beginning. I don't know why they never did anything. I've considered a lot of explanations. Squatter who panicked when I found the bag, fugitive passing through, someone running from something rather than hunting something, someone hunting something, but not me. None of those explanations feel complete. What I keep coming back to is the circle. The deliberate, careful, complete circle around the booth while I was inside it. You do that to understand something. You do that to measure. I've never worked a security job since then. I probably never will.